Hello, Music Bear here. Um, this video is a little bit different because it's like an answer to a poster on the forum that actually was complaining a little about not having seen any video that kind of took a basic approach, like explaining each and every component, and especially the parts on the components. When he was reading the wiki, he didn't know what a track was. He didn't know what balance was, and so on and so forth, or where it was, and how it could be operated. So this is not the next part of the synth series that I'm doing semi-regularly. No, this is a you would call it a starter's guide to the to elements, which is what I called LMMS. I call it elements because that's possible to pronounce. I am not using the whole window. If you saw my video on presenting elements, you will see that it's quite fuzzy, but now we have to explain different components on the interface, and that will not work. So I'm going to use the small window so we can have a decent quality on the video. But then I'm going to drag each and every window inside and explain it. As you can see here, this is the main form. I can highlight it. This is the main form. This is where everything takes place. That's how it's going to look when you open elements for the first time. You have here, it's say untitled. It means that you have not saved your project yet, and then you have the current version of elements, which is the 1.0.2, and that is the newest official edition of elements. If you have something like the 1.0 or the 1.01, you should update to this one. Right. Everything else takes place in this guy. This is the song editor. And in the song editor, when you open LMS for the first time, you will see it has 4 tracks. It has a triple oscillator, which is an instrument. And if you look here, you can see here we have a vertical bar. This is the test bar. If I press it, you will hear the instrument. Listen. This guy here is called sample track. This is only if you have a recording of something that you would like to have in your track. If you do not have a recording, I would suggest that you remove this. And you can do that from this this control here, the cogwheel. You press it, and it has 2 options. You can clone this track, which means you make a copy of the track, or you can remove the track. And since we are not going to use a sample in this episode, in this test, I will remove it so you can see what then happens. See, now we only have 3. The next track is called a bit and bassline track, and it's referring to another component of elements. It's referring to this guy over here, which is called the beat and bass editor. You can see here that I have in the beat and bass editor, I have the same name here. It would probably be easier if we change the name, because you can see it's a beat and bassline 0. That's not a good name for for anything in elements. So I right-click this, and I get a naming component up. And what I'm going to put in here is a kick drum. So I write kick, and now you can see it changed the name. And if I take a look again at the beat and bass editor, the name here has now changed to kick, meaning that this is the beat and bass line that has focus right now. If I do something here, like putting notes in, and I do that on every beat of the instrument, which is a kicker, an instrument meant to produce kick sounds. We'll look at that later. You should be able to hear something that could resemble a drum. There are better ways to make drums, but perhaps we'll have time to look at that also. And you can see I have here now in my track the name kick, and I have changed the note in the beat and bass line. So if I played now, it would be expected that I could hear these notes, but that is not what's going to happen, because I have to add a event in the song editor, and I add an event just by clicking the left button. Now I have added an event of this track here. This is the track, and this is the event. I have to bring it up here. And this is the event. If I now start replaying my song editor, yes, then I will hear my my kick drum. Listen. Okay, so in the beat and bass line editor, I compose, if you can say that. I guess you can if you're a drummer. I think they also call it composing. I compose the rhythm section, and I can, in my song editor, make an event of that. If I, in the beat and bass editor, now go in and say I will add another beat and bass line, that I'm doing here, you can see add beat bass line. I'm now getting something called beat and bass line 1, and that is a reference to this guy. You can see here up is my kick, and now we have something here called the beat bass line 1. I will call that, rename it, I just right clicked it, remember, and I will call it hats. I'll call it close hats, actually. So now I have a kick and a close hats, and because they're both member of the same kind of instruments, that is percussions, I will move them together. I can move any component out here by getting my mouse pointing at this knobbled part here and press left mouse, and then I can move it. Neat, isn't it? So that was my kick drum track, and this is my close hat song editor track or event holder. But if I add the event here and start to replay, I can of course not hear any hats because I haven't composed them. So I will have to go here and look now here. This is a composition for the kick, but I have to go for the close hats, and then I have to add some hats, and I can find them out here in the sidebar. The sidebar contains my instruments, it contains my projects, it contains my samples, and those are exactly the thing I'm looking for. We'll come back to that. It contains my presets or my instruments, which is just about the same, and it contains a reference to my home directory and to my computer. We rarely use those, but they are there, so you can go and find something on your computer. But what I was looking for was my samples, and you will also see that they're nice and informative. What they're called? I can't remember. So we're going to open here, and I have here a collection which is a factory collection, or it's shipped with elements, and I can find down here some close hats. For instance, that one or that one. And listen, when I hold my mouse over and press left mouse, I can pre-hear so I can find the thing I like the most. Oh, let's take this guy. I hold left mouse and double click it, and it will appear in a beat and bass editor. Or I can hold I can take another one. I can hold my mouse down and drag it over and release the mouse, and I will also have a sample in the beat and bass editor. Or I could right click and I will get a context menu and select send to active instrument. That is, if I have opened an instrument like that, this opened instrument is now active. So if I go down here and say send to active instruments, I have to move this guy up here just a second so you can see what happens. Look at this pattern here. That is the waveform. So now when I go in here and see, okay, I'm going to send to active instrument, then look, boom, it changed, because now it's this guy, and it also changed name. Very neat. So it goes like this. But if I took that one and said send to active instrument, which is this one, it goes like this. Send to active instrument. So there are many ways to access different type of component in Elements, and that is a very nice thing. So you can find the way you like to work the best. I'll remove that because we don't want to have that inside here. Close hats, they go like I'm just doing. Just close that again so we get a little bit more space. I'm just doing this for every second. Like that. So now take a look here. I have a kick composition and I have a closed hat composition. There's nothing wrong in putting in events here also. Those will be in the closed hat track if I put in some kicker events. Like for instance down here I could put in 2 kicks. But then I would absolutely suggest that the track name was changed so to something like closed hat and 2 kicks, because otherwise you will get confused later. But right now my event of this this beat and bass line contains both hats and kicks. Let's listen. And we will just not to confuse this. Listen. Boom, boom. So you hear both the hats that I put in and the 2 kick in the end. Listen. Right. But in this guy, this container, only the kick, because in the beat and bass line we had this track, the closed hat, with a couple of kicks, but in the kick line we only had kicks, right? But I could of course also put some hats in, like. So now we have new events of another instrument. I don't recommend that. I like to have separate instruments in each beat and bass line. It's much more flexible. But listen, that was. I remove those, and we're not going to make any more beat and bass lines because that should be, if not crystal clear, then at least understandable. Instead, we're going to make some instrument events, which is called notes, and that should be pretty easy to understand. An instrument is a preset that is inserted in the song editor. So let's bring an instrument in, and if I take it from the instrument plugin, I will have to drag it in, and I can, for instance, drag an empty, because this is important. This is not a preset. There's no part of this instrument that has been changed. This is as they come directly out of the factory box. It opened all over in another other commune. But it looks like this, and there's nothing in it, so these are factory settings. So this is when you want to start from scratch and make your own instrument. Then you bring in something up from this collection here, the instrument plugin. I remove that. If we, on the other hand, wants to have an instrument that has been changed, we take it from this section here, My Presets. So we can open here and we can go to the same type of instrument, and we can find one here. This is some that you will also have in your own LMS, because this is a factory instrument. You can hear I can pre here. And I have several options now. I can drag it, as you saw. I can context and use any of these. Now there's no active instrument, so that wouldn't work, but I can put it into a new instrument in the song editor. Why not do that? So here it is, and I'll close the sidebar, and here we have now this instrument, and if I click this button that represents the instrument opens, and it looks like this, and it sounds like this. It could be a bass, right? So how do I put in notes of that instrument into my song then? This is where I put in a note container. I think I'll go out here in the little bit brighter brighter gray boxes and put one in. Because then you can see what happens. I just left click and look at what happens there. Now you can see there's something in here, and that is a note container. I cannot stretch this note container. I can stretch these guys, the beat and bass lines. I cannot stretch a note container. It will take the size automatically as I add notes to it. Now I'll just move it to the position where the beat and bass tracks are. I can move it with left mouse and just push it around. I can remove it. I'll add another. I can remove it by using its context menu. It says cut or it says delete. If I cut it, I can go to yet another place and say in here I can paste it. Then it would be the same part, but this doesn't mean anything when there's no notes in it, right? So let's put some notes in it. And such a container is exactly 1 bar default. These numbers up here represent the bars, and the bar is 4 beats, and 1 beat has 4 ticks. That is in the time signature of 4/4, which is default. I'll now open this container. I double click it, and it opens like this. This is called the piano roll, and this is where you compose your song. And the piano roll has several smart tools that you can use. You can choose how the magnification of the piano roll should be. I like to work in the 200% for some reason, but don't have to. The Q is the quantizer, and it means if I now put in a note, I can put in a note here, like that. It will end, you can see, when I move it, pretty annoying, when I move it, it jumps to exactly 1/16 of one beat, or 4 sections, 4 ticks in a beat and they are 1/16 of size. If I, on the other hand, choose to have 1/8 in the quanticizer, then you can see now it moves 2. So this is where you set the graining of how fine you will be able to place your notes. Then I have this guy here called the notes selection, and I can choose any kind of notes. Then all the notes, when I press, I can for instance press here the quarter. When I put in a note now, it will be a quarter note every time. But if I drag this note out to be longer, I just take it in the right end, and I can drag it or I can push it to any size that I like. When I put in a note, it will still be a quarter note, but if I up here select the last note, like that, now it's the last note. If I then click this note just to hear it, and then add a note, you can see now it is of the size of the last note I touched. Very neat way to work with notes. You can see I can take like that and make it so. Very neat. Sometimes you will find, oh, I can't size the notes to the size I want a quarter note. That's because your quanticizer determines how graining you can the graining you can set on your notes. So if I want to have a default workspace, it's always 1/16, like that. I'll just mark these notes for deletion. When I mark notes, I hold, this is exactly like you probably know from a lot of other programs. You hold Control and press A, or you can hold your mouse, then you have to press Control, and you can drag a square, a rectangle over the notes, and they are also marked. Then I can press Delete, and they're gone. And those were stupid notes, so why shouldn't we let those go? So that was how the note are made and what you can do to them. I'll put in a note here, and you can see I now, you can't see, but if I show you, I have now chosen 1/16, so I can make the note exactly 1 tick wide, and it sounds like this. If I make another note here, and I make it 2 ticks wide, it sounds like this. And I can put in a note down here. It should stay inside the view. And we can go a little bit up here, and because now I had this quarter note, so I will just press at any space here, you can see, oops. If I remove this note, and I can do that by holding my mouse over it and just press the right mouse button, then it's gone. I can hear the note if I hold my mouse over it and press the left mouse button. Listen to how the note sounds. And I can shuffle it around up and down by holding I can shuffle it up and down by holding the mouse and moving in any direction. But you will also hear the note playing at the same time, so you can hear where it was placed. Very neat. Good programming. And because I have chosen 16th, you can see every time if I deliberately hold my mouse in between, in the middle of 1 tick, as they're called, the note will jump to position like that. See? Because I have chosen 1/16. So if I want to have notes in between, I of course have to choose 1/32 of a note length. It's all. Then I can place it in between ticks. But that's a little cumbersome to work like that, because often you have to to move them to the other position. So default working progressive is 116. Oh dear, time runs, time runs. Yes, those were notes and note events, and I move them around a bit here. Listen. And you will also find out that if you want to have something that goes with the beat, you will need to have it either on beat or off beat. Then it goes nicely with the beat. We're going to listen here to no, one thing more I have to mention. As I said, there were 4 beats, so these lines here are beat lines, and that line there is 1 bar, and it's also saying 1 right there. Here it says 2 and 3 and so on. So those, a space like this and to infinity, no, not infinity, because we only have 8 octaves, was inside 1 bar. That note is in first bar and second bar, and those notes here are in the second bar. First bar, first beat, first bar, second beat, second tick, first beat, third tick, first beat, fourth tick, first beat, and then again first tick, second beat in first bar. Right. I can close my my piano roll by simply pressing the piano roll button again. Then it closes. And now I have here a 2-bar piece in my song editor. My notes were, you can see automatically now it has changed its size to 2-bar. So I'm also going to change these guys here to 2-bar. That was the close hats, and that is the kick. And then we have a neat feature up here that is called loop points. Loop points are controlled from this knob here, and you can see now they are lighting up. I have a start loop point and I have a stop loop point. I can move these loop points by pointing up to the bar line, the bar, and press a right mouse. If I press right mouse without anything else, it is the end loop point that jumps to the position. If I press what's good, the capital or the shift key, then it is the start that moves in position. Just have to move it down there, and sorry. So now let's listen to the 2 bars of music that I have made. Because we are working with loop points, the playhead will only or continuously stay inside the very small section of music that I have made. If I move or disable the loop point and then start replay, you can see that the playhead moves and moves and moves, and it will never stop before I stop it up here. And that gets us to yet another functionality, because we can choose how our playhead behavior should be. You can see here, after stopping, go back to the begin. That is one behavior. Another behavior is after stopping, go back to the position at which playing was started. And yet the last behavior is yoo-hoo. After stopping, keep position. So those are the behaviors. See, I will not go into how to make instruments today. I may make another small video about that, but that will come later. Right now you can use the factory instruments, and there's a large collection of factory instruments. But if you look at some of my other videos, you can see I have a whole series of how to program the Syn at Sub FX, or Syn as I like to call it, and I think I also have other instruments that I have shown how to program. But this should get you started with LMS, and perhaps I will show you something more later. We have to look at this, the mixer, because the mixer is where we control how the whole composition, the whole song, eventually is going to be in the final result. And if I open an instrument here, you can see it has something up here called the FX. You should always make sure that none of your instruments are pointing to the 0 FX channel, because the 0 FX channel is this guy, and that is the master. It should never point to master. I'm not going to go so extremely deep into how the mixer works, because the mixer will be very, very different in the next release. So it will just pretty much be wasted time. But make sure that none of your instruments point to the master. So you just roll your mouse button or your drag with the left mouse down. Do like that. And in this case, I'm going to put it at the first. But make sure that your FX channel do not point to the master. And I also think that you should make sure that none of your instrument points to the same channel. So this one we should change to 2, because we had 1 on the first. And that also goes for the percussion instruments. So we'll open the beat and bass editor, and I normally like to use that was the range, sorry, that was the pitch range, which I haven't mentioned. There's a lot of things I haven't mentioned. I like to go in this search group, but that will be obsolete very soon. Now all our instruments has its own FX channel in the mixer. I think I'll stop there, and if you feel there's something especially difficult to understand in Elements, post on the forum, and I will try to help you either there or perhaps with yet another small video, which didn't ended up being so small. But without any further ado, I will just say thank you for watching, and I hope you have a lot of fun with Elements, and bye bye.